All right, going live here. So hopefully everything sounds very good. Um, got a new microphone that's supposed to be really, really good for this purpose. And my hope is that the low end of it gets rid of most of the background noise, but it's nice and loud and clear for everything that matters. So let me know. Let me know how the audio levels are. And yeah, so some of the things I need to do, I believe there's actually a way, and I haven't done any of it, but I need to kind of figure out what it would be. Um, but creating custom uh, emoticons. So I've been kind of exploring, um, all of the options that I have for live streaming now. And there are supposed to be a bunch of new ones. I'm not sure how I enable all of it. But they're called reactions, but they're basically emoticons. I should be able to do some custom ones. So I'm going to figure those out. See if I can't get a couple. And this mic has a couple interesting features. One of which that I was sorely lacking is the ability to mute. And so, yeah, it's great. I really hope this mic ends up turning out pretty good. So, all right. I've also been messing around a good bit with the setup here. To get my layout better. So now I have this layout as being right in front of me. I can have the model down here, which is, for me, it's closer to me, but for you, it's at the top, which is great. And then pieces that I can sort through get to be well in frame. So it kind of aligns everything much better. And I think this is going to be a much superior view for doing this type of live stream. Reorient a few things on my screen. I really need to get like a second monitor up here or something. Give myself a little bit more screen real estate. All right. So I'm going to dive into it. I hope as people come in, I'll say the things that I normally say, trying to do the shameless self-promotion a little bit better than I normally do. I'm pretty bad at the shameless self-promotion, but it's something that I really should do more of. Try to kind of rebuild things. Make sure to join Discord here. Always get that in the chat, so if there is anyone who's joining who hasn't been on here before, they have the ability to join it. And let's see, is there any other shameless self-promotion that needs to happen? I don't think so. That's the big one. Just trying to get the Discord to be a little bit more active. All right. I'll begin digging into this. Hey, Scholar General. How are you doing? Been a while since we've seen you on. I think this is the first time you've been joining us since I've restarted at the beginning of this week. So welcome back. Appreciate you joining. And Switcheroo Buckaroo. That would be the other piece of shameless self-promotion now that people are saying hello. Hey, Wyoming. Make sure you're saying hi in the chat when you jump in, which all three of you have done, and we had 3 concurrent viewers, so that would probably cover everyone. But yeah, it's just kind of a general thing. As people join in, getting in the chat and letting me know that you're here. It's fine if you just want to be a creepy stalker type, but yeah, hopefully this view and it is a better view for this type of live stream. I certainly hope it looks better and is easier to see everything. And I hope that this microphone is better. So if there are any audio issues, please let me know. But I was listening to some recordings that I did as a test earlier, and it all sounded much better. So he just got stomped in chest and thought it'd be nice to watch Legos and decompress. Funny you should say that. It's been a long time since I played chess. And I was at the local coffee shop today. I met my family for lunch, and then my wife wanted to grab a cup of coffee because we've been a little bit exhausted after the past couple of days with a sick kid and all. And so she wanted some midday coffee. And there was a guy in there who was playing multiple people at once. You know, those kind of really skilled chess players. And it was really cool to see because he was casually talking to them, but he was giving very interesting instruction as he went, kind of telling them his thought process, and oh, you did this, and that's a good way to do it, and oh, are you winging it here? And it was kind of interesting. So while we were waiting on our drinks, he was doing that. It was pretty interesting to watch. I like chess. I actually love chess. It's been a long time since I played it. But I'm not good at it, right? I understand the basic strategies, but I'm not good at it. I think the last time I actually really seriously played it on the regular was back in high school, which is crazy. Let's see. Spongma says there's Dragon Ball characters on that shelf. Yeah, we were talking about the other day about model kits, the Gunpla model kits, which is usually Gundam style. And I brought these up here to talk about. And you guys should tell me how much when I'm moving around the audio fades out. But I have an Android, I guess got hold over here, Android 18 model, which this one's like an action figure, so it's actually posable. And I have this Vegeta one. And I was at like a thrift store, and they had this Vegeta one for $4. So I was like, well, of course I'm going to buy it. Vegeta's one of my favorite characters. And I built it, and I had so much fun building it. I was like, I need to get more characters. And so these are the 2 that I have right now. The Android 18 one is a much higher quality. So yeah, let me know how the audio goes. Wyoming says the old mic would fade out. You turn your head, so yeah. And I haven't put this one on an arm. I can put it on an arm so I can move it around, but it is it has a couple options, one of which is fully omnidirectional, and one of which is the kind of the standard, what I would call standard omnidirectional mic, which is actually kind of 2 fields, front and back, which is what it should be on now. So it's mostly catching me directionally because there's really nothing on the other side that can make sound. I have a fan at my feet to kind of keep me cool, and I think it's probably most of the background noise, either that or the fan on the laptop making noise. But hopefully it's just a better quality. I felt like the other one was a little bit tinny. And I have 2 qualities to my voice. One is I have a fairly low voice. Not a super low one, but a fairly low voice. And the second one is just kind of speech pattern in general. I tend to have very hard S sounds because of it's honestly because of a slight speech impediment where I don't really form my S's like most normal people. And so, kind of figuring out how that ends up sounding on the mic is interesting, trying to figure that out. I hate my voice, though. I hate it. I hate listening to it on recordings. I said that yesterday, or not yesterday, day before yesterday, and it still holds true. I really hate hearing my own voice. It's awful. But yeah, I've been trying to reason about how to make this stream a little bit easier to follow and view. The idea of having the instructions on the screen, having having the instructions on the screen and having a good kind of table layout with camera layout hopefully makes it all a little bit better. But I'm glad to be able to do the stream tonight because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to. I kind of had this initial gut feeling that I was probably going to be spending another night having to kind of calm my daughter down and keep her happy until she fell asleep. But she actually went to sleep on her own fairly well. So... this is going to be an interesting part of this castle build because we're creating kind of the turret features. So I'll be curious to see how they do it. It helps if you do that before that other piece. And I don't know how this night's going to be. This might be a one bag night. Although this bag seems fairly small, so I might be able to fly through it pretty quickly. But it's been a pretty exhausting couple of weeks, and I'm beginning to feel it, especially after yesterday and today, where it was kind of all about a sick kid. Okay, why did that off center? Oh, it's printed that way. Okay. So I might end up calling it quits early. I don't know, but I really want to spend more time doing this. Wyoming says, my voice sucks. It's way too deep. And years as a Leo has it's ingrained a tone most people hate. Real kicker is the Kentuckian hillbilly accent. Yeah, I've been told from an accent perspective that I have a slightly hard accent to place. I don't think I do. I think I have a fairly standard Georgia accent, although I don't have a heavy southern drawl. But I have had people ask me where I'm from because they couldn't quite place it. It's one of those things where you hear things like that. Someone asks you where you're from, and you get confused because you're from the exact same place they're from, or they make some comment about your voice, and you just kind of take that. You're like, okay, I think that's how that works, and then you hear your own voice, and you hear the way it actually sounds to other people. Right, the way the voice sounds to you is not how it sounds to other people, and everything about it sounds wrong. You think, wow, I hear all these things about my voice that I don't hear when I'm not listening to a recording. And years of having listened to my own voice in recordings has really made me have I believe a very realistic view of my own vocal patterns. It's standard Atlanta-ish. Yeah. I can affect a southern drawl if I really wanted to. But it is just an affectation. It's not really how I sound in general. So this is cool. Check this out. So I'm kind of building this part right here where our window is going to be. And then we're doing what's called a snot brick, which stands for studs not on top. So side pointing studs. And we're adding these little flat tile bricks that we're then going to place in between to create very, very narrow arrow slit windows, which is pretty cool. I actually really like the way they did the arrow slits on the castle, the 3-in-1 castle that I built on stream a couple months back, because it actually has the triangular window shape as well, and this one doesn't really have that. Well, phone is buzzing. Always gotta check. Is anything important? And no. Get that back into the view a little bit. And you can't really see, this is the downside of these angles, is the best view is in front, but then you can't see anything I'm doing on the face of it, which is kind of strange. So you want to know what I'm doing when you in areas you can't see. You just need to look at the actual instructions image, I suppose. Goodness. These went flying. And I get to spend my weekend, because of all the nonsense that's been going on, I get to spend my weekend repairing everything. Repairing a garage door, repairing carpet padding on the carpet downstairs. It's going to be kind of a busy, restless weekend, but hopefully it means everything is done and I can begin to unwind a bit more, which would be good. So I'd wondered aloud at the end of last stream whether or not I'd be building up or out. Definitely looks like we're building up with this build. I can hear my deaf cat downstairs screaming her head off as well. Don't know if the mic is picking that one up, but if it is, it probably sounds like a banshee. You get to replace a part of the fence this weekend. That's another task for me. I also need to replace a part of my fence. But mine is unfortunately a chain link fence, so I gotta go buy all the stuff for it. It's not... I've never actually repaired a chain link fence. I can't imagine it's that hard. But I had a tree take out part of my fence, so I get to do that. But I'm not going to do that this weekend. That's going to be a different weekend. Like, basically everything that could go wrong as a homeowner seemed to go wrong all at once. Oh, there's the cat. Why don't you settle down, cat? But yeah, everything that could go wrong went wrong. Had a tree take out part of a fence line. Had flooding downstairs, which required entire like main water supply replacement. It was just nonsense through and through. All while I'm trying to get my bathroom remodeled. It's a loud cat, and that's not even her normal loudness. Yeah, fences are expensive. It's it's the part that's so frustrating about it is we just installed that fence at the very beginning of basically spring of this year, so it's only a couple months old. It's always sad to lose a tree. I live around nothing but trees, so you kind of don't miss them for the most part. My wife just reminded me in chat that the cat is deaf, and telling her to hush is pointless. Yeah, the epic story of our fence at our house is the story of trees falling on fences, basically. We had a white picket style fence that came with the house when we bought it. Tree fell on it, destroyed the fence. Or actually, take that back. A tree fell next to it and knocked out a single post, like a single picket, not even a post, just one of the pickets. And I went out there and I hammered that picket back in, and was gonna get ready to cut up the tree. And the very next day, another tree fell and took out the entire fence. So we ripped up the entire fence and basically said, screw it. And we went for a couple of years without any fences. And then we had kids, we wanted to re-fence it in so that we could have clear boundaries for them to play in. So. The hard part are the posts. If it didn't bend the post, it should be quick and easy. Yes, and the lucky part, from what I can tell, it didn't bend any of the posts. It literally just took out the crossbar piece because it's a chain link fence. It just took out the crossbar piece. And my understanding is, as long as it doesn't do a lot of damage to the actual chain link part, you can basically just apply that and put it back up. But I haven't really even gone out there and assessed the damage or cleaned it up, because it was just one of the many things that had been going wrong, and it was not high on my priority list. So, as I said, it's been a fun couple of weeks. So. You had a semi slide into part of yours. Wyoming, I feel like I need to better understand like how your property is positioned. You're in the middle of nowhere, but you're apparently close enough to a highway that a semi can slide off the road and destroy your fence. Is that an accurate assessment? You're like somewhere along the Midwestern roads where somebody falls asleep at the wheel because it's nothing but flat, straight land. And at least there, I would hope that their insurance would at least pay for part of the repairs or something, right? A country road with a semi on it? See, that's crazy. So the instructions say, why ever is this entrance being covered? Is yon chamber down below meant to be hidden from her ladyship? And as I predicted, this is the hidden section, the trap door that leads to the forestman's hideout here. Oh, see? Now, you just make it make too much sense. The semi's there delivering hay, which is, you know, I guess that makes sense for your case. Was it a like a wire fence? Like what type of fence was it? An electric fence or something? Cattle fence, barbed wire. Yep, see, now I appreciate you answering that because that whole question was a setup for me to ask you if it was really like on purpose or if just things went haywire. Haywire. That's my dad joke. And I'm sorry that I did that. Looks like we're about to build something maybe potentially slightly anachronistic. Because I got a little piano style keyboard here. So it may be a harpsichord, but yeah, it's true. You have to repair it quickly. And you're right. I'm not sorry. I'm never sorry about my terrible puns. Because if I was, I would stop doing it. But I don't stop doing it. I continue well beyond when it is appropriate. Wyoming, kids call you Punisher. I actually have a shirt that that Casey got me that just says the Punisher. I think it was you who got me, honey. It might have been your parents. Either way, they're calling me out on my bad jokes. There it is. Yeah, we're building a pretty interesting little harpsichord here. It looks like still a little bit anachronistic. But I haven't even gotten through the concept of editing a clickbait video about the staircase, so I can't exactly do another one already about the anachronistic nature of a harpsichord in a medieval fantasy castle. When people groan at a bad pun and they call you on it, you just tell them that you're a pundit for punishment. And that's what I always do. It doesn't go over very well. I don't have many friends. Alright, so check it out. Little harpsichord. It's a pretty clever little build. Instructions say, "Hark, are those melodious sounds of a harpsichord? What a modern musical marvel." Yes, cat, you're at my feet. I feel you. Alright, this is an interesting kind of complex thing to try to figure out. The puns and dad jokes are constant in our home, as they should be. Doesn't make them good, it just makes them a thing, but yesterday, I was thinking about it after I'd said it yesterday. I said I thought Animaniacs was my favorite cartoon show. But I have to take that back. I think it's actually Futurama. That counts, right? I don't know why that suddenly popped in my mind again, but it did. Looks like we're doing staircase number 2 here. And what I thought was going to be a chimney turned out to be the window. So there is no chimney for that oven in the bottom of this thing. It's funny when your kids answer the teacher with fortitude because it's the answer to life, the universe, and everything. It's only funny to the teacher once in their entire life, and then they just get annoyed by it. Because I'm sure it's exactly the type of answer they get all the time. Really, mostly since the movie came out. I think it was a lesser known thing before that movie came out. When it was just a book that fewer people had read. And yet I'm making a fireplace now. So where is this fireplace going to go? I have a feeling I know exactly where it's going to go, and it's going to be very confusing. Yeah, I never actually grew up with that book. I know my father had read it. I had never read it prior to the movie. So I got to actually somewhat appreciate the movie for what it was, which was good in that case, I think. Yeah, so here's my fireplace. My fireplace is... Here we go. You have the oven down here, the fireplace up here, and nothing is connecting them, and they're both under stairs. So I have more ammunition for my clickbait false rage video about the architectural inaccuracies of a Lego castle. It is very strange. I find it very strange because honestly other sets actually consider that, and it's weird that this one seems to be very intentionally ignoring the fact that there needs to be a chimney. All right. Possible that the chimney is built into the stone to heat like a Roman bathhouse. Yeah. I suppose that's possible, but I don't know that I've ever seen that in a medieval architectural design. Not that I'm all that well versed, but my understanding of most medieval architecture when it came to castles is you tended to have very large hearths and you had offset chimneys so that the smoke would always go up and not billow in. And that's why you often had rooms, being vertical so that they could share the same chimney output. Like in terms of sleeping quarters where there were fireplaces. Again, not that I'm super well versed or anything. Just from what I have seen. It could also be, fantasy plastic bricks that don't need logic or reason to be a fun build and an interesting model. But that detracts from the mock rage that I can feel. So like the medieval blacksmith set, it has the forge at the bottom. I'm trying to think of how it was designed. There's like a two-sided forge, so that the blacksmith could work either inside or outside. So had two anvils on either side, and then that forge fed into a chimney that was then in the upper floor, which was like the living quarters of the building. And it was really well thought out. It made sense. It looked correct, and it made some level of architectural sense. And I think that's actually tends to be a fairly common thing. I would think that Lego tends to try to have some kind of consistency or notion like that. So to not see it is actually a little bit surprising, I guess. Because you tend to, it's one of the things, or at least for me when I'm building a model like this, it's where my mind begins to wander to, is I see where certain features are developing, and I make guesses, because I don't read ahead in the instructions. So I make guesses as to what it is that I'm building and where it fits into the overall architectural layout. It makes as much sense architecture in shows like Game of Thrones. Well, yeah, you get the fun disconnects there, but yeah. It's true. And people have made their pedantic rage videos on that, I'm sure. I just don't expect everyone to get everything right in a fantasy something. I would just be happy as long as you get the source material correct. And given they couldn't even do that for Game of Thrones, I wouldn't have high hopes for it. I am very glad I got out of that show when I did. I get to at least leave with somewhat fond memories of it, I suppose. All right. So that was bag 5. Bag 6 is going to have minifigures in it. I'm trying to decide if I want to make this a short stream or not. And I'm leaning towards a short stream. So, might begin to wrap it up here. This was also partially a test to see how good the audio was. I'll probably go back and re-listen to the audio of this one to see if I have any modifications I need to make. I need to find out if there's also supporting software for it that allows for a more feature-rich thing. But hopefully it's a better microphone. Wyoming, you watched less than one season. The first season was very good. And I would argue, not having read the books, I'd argue that the first 5 seasons were very good. But I just got tired of the show at about that point. And there was some really cool stuff that happened, season to season. and some fun and cool characters. But I feel like it fell into the trap of, it was more concerned with the plot contrivances to figure out who was going to die next, rather than telling a good plot that mattered, right? And because they had split their cast across like 4 locations, if not more, and their cast was so big, it means that you got like at best 5 minutes per character, and at worst sometimes none. You could go a couple episodes without even seeing a character, and nothing it got to the point where nothing was satisfying. Like the moment to moment things just were like, oh, okay, that happened, and like, yeah, that person died, but it doesn't matter. Again, not my type of fantasy. I think it's more fun. I think fantasy is more fun when it's actually an adventure. And when you feel like, the story beats are clean and precise, and the plot isn't belabored or feel like it's artificially stretching. And I think it's just the nature of Game of Thrones and what it was trying to be. And kudos to, I guess, to George R. R. Martin and to the showrunners and people who are involved in it, to have something like that is so broad in scope, that tries to be so grounded in some form of reality, in terms of, that you can have a fantasy story that doesn't have just like a main character. That you can have so many characters that are all having their own story and things are happening with. I think that's great. I think that's an interesting concept. I think a lot of fantasy has tried and failed to do that. But yeah, it's just not something that held up very well, season over season. And I think the further they got away from the source material, the worse it got, because there became a very large disconnect between the original vision and what it ended up being. Tried to create the same kind of world as Black Company and did do it half as well. Give me Tolkien any day. Yeah. That's the thing about Tolkien. To me, Tolkien's work was always something that he would always make a statement, and you would go, well, that's a weird statement. What's the context for that? Why is he noting that thing? What is the importance of this thing? And in many, many cases, whether it was appendices or his own notes that got published later, and in the edits by Christopher Tolkien, there might have been a reason for something, right? He'd allude to something that really had, no real basis in the book, and would never have a base in the book. It was like Tolkien wrote his own expanded universe, right? Like, I think about Star Wars, and in Star Wars, there might be a background character that's there for set dressing to look interesting, and then an author of the expanded universe would like create an entire story for that character. And so if you work backwards from that, you have like, oh, there's this really interesting character, and he just happens to be in the background of this scene, but he's this really interesting character. But for Tolkien, that was actually kind of true. Like, he had actually already written a lot of those things. He already had a lot of those concepts, but he was just making a note of it, I guess, for his own enjoyment. And there were so many moments of like that, especially in Lord of the Rings. I think a lot less so in The Hobbit, probably because it was his first. But in Lord of the Rings, there was a lot of that, like, wow, what could that be? What is the significance of this random thing? It's one of the reasons I really liked playing the Lord of the Rings Online, the video game, because it had so many moments like that where you would see something and you go, oh, like, I get what that is, I know what that is. Or they would create entire quest lines around a thing that's only briefly mentioned in the actual works. And I like that. I think that's where I would hope one day things based on Tolkien's work could get. Like, I would actually really love to see the expanded universe of Middle-earth, that other authors could come along and create their stories. I think Tolkien, in some of his letters even said, Like, that would be an end goal and something worthwhile. But it has to fit, right? It has to actually match the vision of the original author. And that's where, like, I think the people who are big fans of the Star Wars extended universe, the original extended universe before Disney got hold of everything, like, the fans of that, they liked it because it kind of fit the vision of Star Wars, and it expanded on it in a respectful way, that I'm sure doesn't really exist for the new canon for Star Wars, really. And I would hope that one day that we could get that for Lord of the Rings, like really good books that are, say Lord of the Rings, for Middle Earth, really good books that can create brand new stories that take place in Middle Earth, that echo Tolkien's vision for what that world was like, but doesn't rely on Tolkien's work to be a valuable piece of media or a novel or whatever. Christopher refused to allow expansion unless he did it. Yes, but it's worth noting that Christopher Tolkien had a very different view of his father's work. He was very unwilling to allow for that expansion. And again, I'll go back to Tolkien himself didn't seem to disallow for that. He seemed to express interest in that being the case, but Christopher Tolkien didn't want that because he wanted the vision to be maintained as long as possible. And I can respect that. I'm saying as a fan of Middle Earth, I would love to see good authors do something with that world. Because it's possible. It is possible. It's just that today's world, people seem to be more interested in trying to fast track a profit motive or shoehorn in something that doesn't fit, right? We don't need the sitcom based in Middle Earth, right? We don't need that. We don't need if someone were to start to write Middle Earth novels at some point, we don't need them to write the expanded story of Gandalf, right? Like, and this is what I would argue for Star Wars. If you wanted Star Wars to be good, truly good, you need to divorce from the original content. The worst thing that has been consistently done in the Star Wars expanded everything, but especially new shows and films, is that they cannot get away from rehashing the same characters and the Jedi and the Force and the Empire and Obi-Wan and Anakin and Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. Like, part of what was really good about The Mandalorian Season 1 was that it was, in many parts, its own story. And yeah, they had the Baby Yoda, which was kind of a nod to Yoda, but you could forgive it because there wasn't too much of the Force and lightsabers and all that. But by the end of the whatever it was, the second season, you had reintroduced dark sabers and you'd reintroduced the Empire really fully, and then you were having Luke Skywalker show up, and it's like, no, I don't want any of that. You could totally create really interesting plots, very unique to the universe, and never have to reference the Jedi or lightsabers or the Empire. You could totally do that, because quite literally the galaxy is your oyster. And if you treated the Empire and the Rebels and the Jedi as being like, yes, that's a thing, but there are all these other things that could occur, you could create some really interesting content. And it just doesn't happen. Because, to quote Red Letter Media, consume product. Don't ask questions, consume product, and then consume more product, right? They're not selling you on a good story anymore. They're selling you on the next iteration of a lightsaber or the next powerful Jedi. And that's literally what they try to do with the sequel trilogy, right? They're like, let's introduce new Jedi with new lightsabers and new Force abilities, and not do anything interesting with the actual story or with the characters. Let's just sell it. Let's merchandise it, right? And it just didn't work. I did an okay job expanding the world, but they only did source material for the RPGs, so the piece was only a small window of the backstory. Yeah. You know, I guess the way I put it is, take a fantasy author who has a unique, interesting fantasy story in his mind, and then let that person tell that story, but through the lens of like Middle Earth, right? It's possible. But and that's part of why I'm so reticent and reluctant to actually bother with any of that stuff as it comes out now. It's the reason I'm not really at all interested in the Lord of the Rings series from Amazon. It just doesn't look like there's any of that being done. And I get that for that, it's a licensing problem. They licensed the appendices, so they're really, really locked into like a very specific thing, cast of characters, whatever. But realistically, they should just try to do their own thing and not rely on callbacks, right? I don't need to see... Galadriel does not need to come out of the role she had in Lord of the Rings. We don't need Galadriel's backstory. We don't need Eminem as Sauron or whatever it is that's going on with that stuff. We don't need a rehashing of hobbits. Like, those things don't need to be touched because they're unimportant. They're important to Lord of the Rings. They're important to The Hobbit. They're important to the lore of Middle Earth. But if you're going to go back to the Second Age and tell those stories, there's better ways of doing it. And you can make a character like Kellen Brimbor a main character and tell that story. Have it be a very interesting story. There's a huge cast of characters in Tolkien's Middle Earth that have really been not touched at all in any type of film or TV or anything, right? Because we really only have Hobbit movies and Lord of the Rings movies. And, plural, both the cartoon versions and whatnot. But the moment you rely on pulling in characters we've already had established before, you're kind of undercutting your own credibility or your own ability to create something new and interesting. I think that's my biggest problem with it. There's probably tons of things to have as problems with it. But my biggest one is I just don't need to see the same characters again. And I don't need to see the same characters being portrayed within recent memory of it being portrayed nearly flawlessly, right? Cate Blanchett was such a perfect Galadriel that having anyone else as Galadriel is completely screwed up. And I had this was an argument I had with a friend about the Halo TV series. I said that the one giveaway I had that the Halo TV series wasn't going to be good, if there's only one giveaway, it's that they cast Jen Taylor as Cortana and not Steve Dowds as Master Chief, right? You have the voice actor of Cortana now playing opposite of someone who is not the voice actor for Master Chief. And immediately by doing so, you're creating this disconnect. It does not matter how good the actor is, even how good his impression is. Like, if he is different at all from the way it is presented in the games, you're immediately taken out of it. And it's not because they're a bad actor or because it's a bad plot or any of that. It's just because we literally had a video game in the Halo franchise released 2 months before the show came out where you had the established voice actors reprising their roles. So bringing in a whole new voice for Master Chief, it does not matter. You're going to lose the gravitas. You're going to lose your entire video game audience just by the voice alone. Didn't matter. The plot was apparently awful, but that's the problem. You have a very, a well-established thing. you're going to have a hard time bringing in a new Galadriel when Kate Blanchett was Galadriel 20. And it's crazy to say, that's 20 years ago that those movies came out. 2 decades. But it's still in pop culture. Those Lord of the Rings films are still relevant today. And people still watch them today. And so you are now going to have this weird comparison of, like, I'm looking at Kate Blanchett's Galadriel, which is such a good interpretation of it. And now I have this warrior elf Galadriel that doesn't match the character at all and is a different actress. And just by it wouldn't matter how good of an actress it is, it could be a great plot, but you're going to have that disconnect. I think that's just the biggest problem I have with so much of this is there's not a recognition of that fact. And I know they want to do their own thing. I know they want to separate it. But if you're going to be doing your own thing and separating it, then cut ties with all the things that you're pulling back in. Don't have hobbits. Don't have Galadriel. Go do something new. Scholar says he agrees with me about the Amazon series. I think there's a ton of untapped potential. Just tell the stories of blue wizards in the East or something. Yeah. And I would love that because the blue wizards are something of the Tolkien lore that I absolutely love. I'm fascinated with them. I even had my wife create a blue wizard costume for me, which I should really wear now, given that I have this beard. But I wanted to be Alatar. I wanted to be the hunter wizard. And I had these concepts that, that she worked on in the costume. I should really don that costume at this point. I really should. But like I even had kind of concepts in my mind of how I would want to present that costume, like what the wizard staff would look like. It's like it's just one of those things where there's again untapped potential. The problem is that again they only licensed the appendices, so they're heavily limited in what they can actually do. And then everything else that they do that isn't part of those appendices, they have to have enough of a separation from any of Tolkien's work while still nodding to it. It's this very fine line they have to balance. But I just don't have faith in it. I look at Cowboy Bebop adaptations, Halo adaptations, Wheel of Time adaptations, which I don't care about Wheel of Time at all. Never read the books, never watched the show. My understanding is people who watched the show after I've read the books really didn't like the show at all. I'm sure there's other failures we talked about. Star Wars in general. Like, there's so many failed adaptations of things. I just don't trust Hollywood to be able to produce a good show at this point. I feel like of all the shows I could have been excited about in the past 2 years, I've only had 2 that I've actually enjoyed, really. Now, I enjoyed, as I mentioned the other day, I watched Sandman, or at least part of it, with my wife, and it's good, but I've never read the original comics or graphic novels, so it's enjoyable for what it is. Have I read Dennis L. McKiernan? A lot of his books are Tolkien-esque. I have not. I can give it a check. I'll be honest, I don't read a lot of fantasy. I have a hard time reading fantasy, actually. I don't know what it is. My reading choices tend to be not hard fantasy or hard sci-fi. I prefer if I'm doing fiction, I prefer more modern fictions, which is why Michael Crichton is one of my favorite authors. And I actually read quite a lot of non-fiction because there's a lot of really interesting stuff out there that is real. So I just have a hard time with fantasy in general. All right, everyone. It is just past 10 o'clock. Been going for a little bit over an hour. I think I'm going to call it quits here. It was a 1-bag build today. Hopefully tomorrow I'm feeling a little bit more well rested, ready to go, and if I do a live stream tomorrow, then we'll try to do a 2-bag live stream. And I'm thinking that maybe the week after that I might do 1 or 2 streams, maybe just 1 stream on Twitch, just to get some more experience doing things on Twitch. And I have a vacation coming up where I'm probably going to try to do some live stream stuff and do that during the day, during the weekday, not just nighttime, to try to be able to pull in some other audience members, etc. So, start with the Iron Tower trilogy and the Silver Call duology. Okay, I will look into those. Thank you, Wyoming. All right, everyone. I hope everyone has a good night, and I will see you all next time.